All right, so you're here today. You were just inside. You walked out. Why?
I walked out because it was worthless. It was the biggest amateur hour presentation I've ever seen about anything, okay? It was ridiculous. There were no answers. Every question that was asked by a member of the state legislature, great questions, no answers, no resolution. They don't know where the drones are coming from. They don't know who's doing it. They don't know why they're doing it, but they say there's no credible threat. It was annoying to be there. I drove 2 hours to be here today, spent an hour in there. I got to drive 2 hours back. The biggest waste of 5 hours in my entire life.
So why do you think they called this meeting?
No idea. Why would you call a meeting to tell people you don't know anything? I have no idea. And then when the legislators would ask questions, there were no answers. Here's the most frustrating part. The colonel of the state police said that he had a helicopter of his flying over above one of these drones, a 6-foot drone or something, I can't remember exactly what he said. And he felt unsafe for his helicopter, so he just let it go. Just let it go. Where'd it go? Who knows? Didn't want to follow it because you didn't feel safe. Is that not the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard? I mean, honestly.
Do they have any idea where these drones are originating?
No, they don't. They would. Maybe if they followed that sucker to when it landed, they would know, but they don't. This is a complete lack of effort, in my opinion, on trying to figure this out. This is not about ability. We have the technology, we have the people, we have the training, we have the resources, we have the money. It's just a lack of effort. I mean,
why?
I don't know. They should be saying, you know what they should have done today with productive use of our time if they didn't know anything? Come in there and say, hey, legislators, we don't know anything. But if you get us these 10 things, do these 10 things for us, and the governor calls in this kind of action, we can figure it out. Will you help us? And then we would have helped them. But instead it was just excuse after excuse and we know nothing. It was infuriating, and I got up and I walked out.
You've been in the service, right?
Yeah, I was an attack helicopter pilot, Apache helicopter pilot in the Army, and I helped stand up the initial unmanned aircraft training battalion in the aviation sector of the Army. So I know a little bit about what I'm talking about, and these guys are not doing the job they need to do to figure out what's going on, and that is the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and the state police.
And they're saying no threat to Americans.
They're saying no threat, but how the hell do they know? They don't know anything. They don't know what it is. They don't know where it come from. They don't know nothing. When I walked in here today, I was actually pretty calm. I was excited to be here to find out a couple things. I thought they'd be like, hey, listen, it's FedEx, trying to figure it out. But instead, I got the most ridiculous amateur hour briefing I've ever sat through.
Wow, that's truly upsetting.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Hello and welcome to what's going to be a very special two-part episode of Reality Check investigating these quite extraordinary so-called drone sightings all across New Jersey. In fact, it's not just across New Jersey, it's across the entire continental United States, across the United Kingdom at certain military bases, and indeed, if what I'm hearing from multiple people from all over the world is right, Russia, China, New Zealand, Australia. This is a worldwide phenomenon. Something that the authorities choose to call drones, I'm more often going to call them objects, are causing mischief across the planet. I prefer to call this perhaps a series called The Drone Debacle, or could we perhaps call it the Defense Department's dithering failure to disclose what the hell is really going on with so-called drones over sensitive airspace and packed civilian areas. We're now at a point where we really do need to know what the hell is going on. If this wasn't a national security crisis before, it sure as hell is now. As you'll see on today's program and the follow-up tomorrow, you're going to see how the concern is ramping across the United States. Mayors of New Jersey, 25 mayors, have got together to express their concern, and we'll be hearing from Mayor Sam Morris from Mine Hill Township in New Jersey. In today's show, you're also going to be hearing from our correspondent Joe Khalil in Washington, D.C. in Congress. And we'll also be talking to Marek von Rennenkamp, the correspondent for The Hill. So let's get into today's program. Let's first bring up Joe Khalil. I'd like to bring Joe in because he's on the ground in Congress. There's a hearing underway of the Homeland Security Subcommittee that's investigating, or supposedly optimistically investigating, with the title Safeguarding the Homeland from Unmanned Aerial Systems. Quite how any assurance can be given at the moment that the homeland is safe when we know what we know, I do not know, but let's bring Joe in and hear from him. Joe, welcome. Can you please tell us first, what is the purpose of this Homeland Security Subcommittee meeting today?
So you've got several military officials today, and the goal of it is to sort of talk about, discuss, explore the ways in which the military can and should respond to drones that are coming over to the United States. Now, when we talk about drones in this context with this hearing, it is all kinds of things. Obviously, over New Jersey right now, we've got a situation where I'm being told by senators that they don't know what this is that's flying around. In other cases, we do know what these things are, and sometimes it's Mexican drug cartels, sometimes it's foreign adversaries. So you've got all different categories, but you're sort of in one big, one fell swoop, having this hearing to decide and go over kind of what are the more appropriate responses when we have incursions on American soil and in American airspace.
One thing, Joe, do we know definitively that they have or haven't been able to confirm that these objects are actually drones? I mean, the spin coming from the Pentagon and different intelligence agencies is that these are foreign adversary drones, that we're not naming Russia or potentially China, if it is China, because we don't want to escalate already inflamed international tensions. Are you buying that? What are your sources telling you around the halls of Congress?
You know, I think they use the word drone because anything that's flying around that is obviously not an airplane or a helicopter, they refer to as a drone. So if you look at the technical definition, what people are seeing right now in New Jersey may or may not fit, depending on where they are. What I'm hearing, though, is that I think there's a genuine frustration on Capitol Hill because there are several senators who are in the committees of jurisdiction, people who are on Homeland Security or are on the Armed Services Committee, who've told me that they have not been given any kind of briefing at all. Now, others say they have. So what that tells me, which isn't totally uncommon, is that there are pockets of senators, potentially those in intelligence or what have you, that are getting general briefing, and others that are not, that are left in the dark, which again frustrates many of them. And the ones who have gotten these are not really talking much about it. They're being pretty tight-lipped about what they've heard.
I know Senator Kirsten Gillibrand has flagged that she's very keen to get answers, and she sits on the Senate Intelligence Committee, a very high-powered senator, and she's been prominent in getting the establishment of ARRO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Is anyone talking UAPs, UFOs, Joe?
Not out loud. No senator is bringing that aspect into the story. I've heard that from other sources here on Capitol Hill, that as they're watching some of the videos that are coming forward, some of the characteristics that they have heard described fit more with the UAP category than with the others. And for instance, there's a, I don't want to get too specific about my sources, but we'll just say generally staff talking to me about the noises that are coming from or are not coming from some of these videos where they're seeing these things. And in some videos, you hear almost like a helicopter noise in the background. And for others, you don't. And for the ones where you don't, most of the drones that we are aware of, maybe commercial ones or larger ones, right, you'd hear that kind of thing. So I'm hearing the conversation, but so far, up to including Senator Gillibrand, at least not yet, and I would love to talk to her now, no senator has brought that forward as a possibility. But what I am hearing from some senators is they're openly saying that we don't know the origin. I've heard that from several senators, that it is not a known right now where these things are coming from and what their purpose is.
Now, that in and of itself to me, is just gobsmackingly extraordinary, Joe. I just, for the life of me, do not understand how the United States, with all of the resources that it has to monitor, track, and interdict objects over sensitive airspace, can't at least follow these objects to their source point if they are solid drone objects that are being maneuvered by a foreign adversary power. Do you find it plausible that we haven't, in the months of these issues, been able to track one of these objects back to source?
I think that there have been several that have not been very publicly reported about that have been tracked back to source, and some of them have been adversaries, which is concerning. I think the bigger sort of open question that makes you scratch your head is if we were to actually know that these drones were from a foreign adversary. It is amazing that not one has even been attempted to have been brought down by the United States military. Granted, they're flying over, in many of these cases, residential areas. But having said that, we certainly have the capability, without shooting drones down, to bring drones down. I've heard that from senators on the Armed Services Committee, that there are mechanisms to do that. And so you would imagine that if this were a case like China or Russia, you have to scratch your head as to why we haven't done that even once yet in the last week or so, as these things have been flying around, openly flying around.
I've actually been told by my own intelligence sources that we have tried and failed to bring these objects down with standard counter-UAS technology, that the technology just does not work, and we're perplexed. Yeah, we're perplexed that we can't do it. One thing, Joe, I wanted to ask you about, and it was just an intriguing thing. I know Americans love their football, but why on earth is the National Football League part of a Homeland Security hearing into these drones? Do you have any idea why?
I should know the answer to that, and I don't at the moment. But by the end of the day today, as people are watching this, I absolutely will know the answer to that question. It's just been a hectic day running around chasing senators. So immediately when I can get back into that hearing, that's going to be the first question I ask.
I mean, I'm presuming it's something to do with the fact that in the run-up to Christmas and after Christmas, there's going to be large crowd events playing football. And I guess if there are unknown drones flying overhead, you don't want to have a large crowd event. There's a possibility, I guess, that some of these big football events could be postponed or cancelled or interrupted in some way because of these unexplained disruptions over our skies.
That's certainly possible, right? And when you have such large amounts of money or big high-profile events like the Super Bowl that will be coming up eventually, the last thing you want is a national security threat hovering over. So that certainly may be one reason they'd be interested to hear and to influence how the American response goes, when it comes to these things.
That would be the ultimate irony, Joe, if after months of pushing for answers on the drones, it's the footy players and the footy viewers who actually force disclosure of what's really going on.
Listen, you can take security, you can take liberty, but you're not going to take football away from America.
Well, Joe, we'll let you get back in there to find out what's really going on. And thank you for stepping in from the halls of power and giving us an update.
Of course, Ross, can I add one thing that I thought was interesting? Is the governor of New Jersey was asked about why he doesn't have more information yet. He said to reporters in the last 48 hours that he's been talking to the White House and the Department of Homeland Security, and the only information as to why we don't have more intel on these is because, in his words here, I'm going to quote him, he says, they seem to be pretty advanced, and that when we put a spotlight on them, they go dark. Which was a very interesting description to me that I don't know that I had ever heard that before about any of the drone incursions that we've seen over the United States. So
I saw that comment too, Joe, and I can tell you that doesn't sound like any known drone technology we're aware of. If it is drones, it's highly advanced technology. I'm sure you'll get answers for us, and we'll be looking forward to talking to you again. Thanks very much.
We're trying and we're answering. We're asking them. Of course, Ross. Thank you.
Okay, I'm now going to bring in the mayor of Mine Hill Township in northern New Jersey, Sam Morris. He's about an hour's drive from downtown New York, and he's got some very interesting perspectives on the local concern, the mounting local concern in and around New Jersey about these anomalous objects. Welcome, Mr. Mayor. What can you tell us? What's the latest coming out of New Jersey? Are you still seeing these objects?
Well, the latest out of New Jersey, and thank you for having me on, by the way. The latest in New Jersey is it's ever spreading. It was isolated a couple of days ago to 3 or 4 counties in North Jersey. New Jersey has 21 counties altogether, and they're now getting sightings in 21 counties. And Staten Island, New York, is also reporting a lot of overhead activity. So
I
it's
noticed
definitely spread.
I noticed one of your colleagues, Tony Perry, who's the mayor of Middletown, New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
just a few hours ago. He said that there were drones, unmanned drones, reported over not just Middletown but also the airspace over the Naval Air Station, Weapon Station Earl. And I'm just wondering whether you've got any weapons or naval stations or weapon stations in your area. Are you seeing any objects? I'm being careful not to call them drones. Are you seeing any objects over any sensitive military facilities in your area?
Yeah, we are. We are about 5 miles from Picatinny Arsenal, which is a weapons development center here in North Jersey. We're an hour and a half from what used to be called Fort Dix, McGuire Air Force Base. And we're hearing that there are sightings of these things over all the bases. There's no delineation or respect for those boundaries whatsoever.
Now, sir, obviously there's been very careful statements, including non-statements from the Pentagon on this so far. I mean, I'm incredulous, to be perfectly honest, that there's been no definitive statement from the Pentagon, one way or the other, about what they can tell us once and for all about these objects. Does that concern you? Does it concern you that we're just not getting answers at the moment?
That is, it's not only concerning; it's the absolute crux of the problem. I have what started all this on Sunday was about 25 fellow mayors of mine in Iowa County decided we kind of were fed up with no answers. So we issued a press release. Sunday morning, we issued a letter to the governor and legislators and federal officials on Sunday evening and started intentionally stirring this up strictly over the fact that we're getting nothing. We understand as mayors, we understand as elected officials, we're not involved in police or military operations. We understand that we stay far away from those things because for safety reasons, security reasons, but to not at least let us know that they know what is going on. Hey, we know what's going on, you guys, and you're going to have to trust us, but this is not unknown to us. They are essentially stating it's unknown to them, to the FAA, to the Homeland Security, and to the Air Force and FBI are saying, we don't know. Well, that's where it's not acceptable.
That's a very grave situation. I don't know if you're familiar with our show, but for many months now, we've been reporting anomalous objects appearing over military installations in the United States, but also overseas, notably Langley Air Force Base in Virginia and the Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. And those events go back many, many months. And the official line consistently from any of the agencies has been that these are drones, that we're led to believe that potentially these are either drones being directed by some unfriendly actor from a foreign adversary nation. But the consistent line has been that we know that these are drones. Are you satisfied on the basis of the answers or the non-answers you're getting from any of these agencies that they actually know for sure that these are drones?
No, no one is. No elected officials that I talk to, they're either colleagues or friends, or we all know each other. We try to work well with each other, regardless of party. None of us know anything. And while we understand that we have to have some faith, right? We have to have some understanding that the people who should know these things do know. They're saying they don't. The FBI has put out that they don't really know what's going on. Governor's office, and I take the governor at his word that he's also very frustrated. So that is what's disconcerting. If I could elaborate, what's upsetting the average resident, and me personally and others I know personally is there's something over our heads physically, right? And these things don't weigh 5 ounces. They can weigh up to 300 pounds. And if they lost power and fell on us, or fell on your car windshield driving down the road, or fell on your house from 400 feet, it's coming through your roof. It's coming through your car. It's coming through your deck. It's going to hit you and hurt you with good probability. And yet we're being told we really have no idea what's going on up there, but they're supposed to know what's going on up there. That's their job.
And we indeed spend an awful lot of tax dollars on paying for national security and national defence. And I find it incredible, and we've been commenting on this on the show for some time, that despite the money that's been paid, there's just absolutely no assurance. The New Jersey Governor Murphy, he actually gave quite an interesting description. He said the drones are very sophisticated. The minute you get eyes on them, they go dark. Now, that's suggesting that these objects, whatever they are able to see what people are doing on the ground and respond, and then hide themselves to display stealth. Are you getting similar reports yourself in your neighborhood?
Well, I'm not. I do know of that statement, but I'll tell you that to take that in a slightly different direction, I don't know why they're going dark. They're not making any secret that they're up there. I know they don't want to be followed, but they come out at 5:30. You know, an eastern seaboard in the U.S. is dark at 5:30 now with daylight savings, and they make no bones about the fact that here they all come at 5:30. They're out till 10 or 11 p.m. and then they go away, right? So I don't know why they even go dark. They're incredibly obvious, and they're not trying to be hidden. If they wanted to be hidden, they'd come out at 2 a.m. They would go through the sky dark, and we'd never know this. We'd all be in the dark about this. We wouldn't know. So I don't even know why they're doing that. If that's what's accurate. But I do know that what's interesting, it started in primarily Morris County, New Jersey, north central New Jersey, right? It's almost a bullseye in the dead middle of north. Now it's spread to 21 counties, but we're not seeing less in North Jersey. We're not seeing less in Morris County and the surrounding counties. We're seeing a similar number, and now they've grown in number in other areas. So that means that they have a larger volume of these things. So making up a number, let's say over Morris County, New Jersey, there were known to be 30. Well, there's still 30. They're still the same number. There's no diminishing of that, but yet there's an expansion in other places. That's disturbing. At least to us, it is.
One of the explanations that has been offered by backgrounding to certain journalists has been the explanation that if we did engage these objects with anti-drone technology or weaponry, we'd risk damaging the people underneath or damaging people and property underneath. What do you think of that explanation?
I know a couple of guys who are FAA licensed drone operators, and that is they've told me that's your big fear. That you don't want to, the guys get carried away. Oh, I'll shoot one out of the sky or I'll run a drone into it. But if they're large, they could hurt someone. Yes, we know sometimes they're over parks or farmland, and that, of course, is ideal. But, we've come up with the idea that they should just follow them home, even if they go dark. So we all know that the military has tracking ability. You can lock on a target, and you're locked on. It doesn't mean you fire or do anything, right? We've all seen the movies. Well, that technology is real. So lock on one of these things and follow it home. It may go dark, but it can't escape that. And
so the implications, though, sir, are that they've tried doing that. They've also tried counter-drone technology, and my sources are telling me that those counter-drone weapons are not working against whatever these objects are, which suggests that whatever they are, albeit they're being called drones, they're displaying advanced capabilities that appear to be demonstrating an imperviousness to the kind of technology we would normally use to disable them.
I will say to you as an elected official, I don't know any of that to be accurate. But if that's accurate, then they need to figure out a different way, and that may be tracking them and bringing them down as safely as you can.
Let's explore the national security implications here, because you've mentioned that you have Picatinny Arsenal, which is a weapons development centre close to your area. Mm-hmm. New Jersey Advance has reported that there have been 11 confirmed sightings of unauthorized drones flying in the airspace over Picatinny Arsenal in recent weeks. And there were, in fact, 18 sightings, but they've been able to confirm 11 incidents. And confirmed means a police officer or security guard has visibly witnessed a drone, and they've got 7 unconfirmed reports of drones, which means a police officer received a call but was unable to verify. Mm-hmm. By any measure, sir, 11 confirmed sightings over what is one of the most sensitive weapons facilities in that part of North America is of grave concern, isn't it?
Agreed. And that's what has people concerned beyond their own personal safety. We all know that they are not, there's a no-fly boundary or zone, and none of that's being respected.
Now, there is a congressional hearing that's happening right now, I think. It's the Department of Homeland Security hearing, Safeguarding the Homeland from Unmanned Aerial Systems. Do you have much hope that there's going to be anything coming out of that that's going to give you an answer?
I don't want to speculate. I don't like to speculate much, but no, I mean, I think if they had a plan or something they could do, they don't really need a Congress. They have enough laws on there. They don't need the Congress to say, well, we had a hearing and we've come up with an idea, go do it. The military and Homeland Security and the FAA are going to do what they've got to do. They have the authority now to do that. So I don't know if much is going to come out of that personally.
So, Mr. Mayor, what do you want to see done? What would you like to see done in your part of New Jersey?
Well, I would like to see if I've suggested this idea, if they know what these things are, if they actually do know, which of course the average person thinks that they do. They think the government knows everything. People think I know all this, but if they do actually know it, they need to put it out through channels in a way to say, hey, look, we can reassure you we know what it is, what these are, and what's going on. There are certain people in the communities and the political and in this law enforcement communities that can be trusted. And people would say, okay, we believe you. We have faith in you and we'll buy into that. People understand national security. They also understand, President-elect Trump. President Trump personally lands at an airport near here, Morristown Airport. And everybody thought, well, that's okay. We don't want him to get hurt. But if they don't actually know, they need to just start finding out. And yes, unfortunately, that may require bringing some down. That may require various aggressive actions on the part of government and the military. But they need to, if they don't know, they need to know. And yes, there's going to be some risk with that, but that may be the risk we have to take.
I'll put to you one explanation that's actually quite concerning that I've received from an intelligence source. The explanation's been given to me that this is Russia demonstrating a capability to deploy drones over sensitive US airspace. And the US reportedly, doesn't want to admit this publicly because to do so is tantamount to accusing the Russians of an act of war. And things being as sensitive as they are at the moment, we don't want to precipitate or escalate the situation any more than we do currently.
I think if this were a foreign country, I think they would probably be bragging about it.
And I think they'd probably be using the same objects in Ukraine, one would have thought.
Ukraine or North Korea, South Korea, anywhere. I mean, but knowing what we do know about Vladimir Putin, let's go with your inference there for a second. He's going to be crowing about this. He's not going to stay under. He's going to say, "Hey, look what I just did to you," right? And he would take a lot of glee in that. That it's a stealth operation from a foreign military that's a stretch, and let's hope it's not. It's one of our fears.
Well, Mayor Sam Morris, we hope we can help get you some answers, but thank you so much for talking to Reality Check and NewsNation, and
Appreciate
we look forward to talking to you again. Thank you
so much.
Okay, I now want to bring in my friend and colleague Marek von Rennenkamp, who's a correspondent for The Hill. Marek's been monitoring the ongoing Department of Homeland Security hearing, which was ostentatiously entitled and somewhat optimistically entitled Safeguarding the Homeland from Unmanned Aerial Systems, which has just completed, or we're actually just coming up to the end of that hearing. Marek, what happened in the hearing? Has there been, I hope, explosions as members of Congress seek answers and try and get some explanations for what these weird objects are?
Well, Ross, first of all, thanks so much for having me back on. And I'll start off by this is a truly bizarre story and series of events. Bottom line from my read of that hearing is that the FBI is utterly clueless about what is occurring over the skies of New Jersey and into New York. There's one gentleman there from the bureau, Mr. Wheeler, who's the assistant director of their critical incident response group. Literally, it just had nothing to add. They say, hey, yes, we're tracking, we're monitoring, but they have no clue. He looked a little hesitant, frankly. He was measured, but any government official is going to be quite awkward when they can't explain something such as this. And I'll just quickly add, in the post 9/11 world, I find it shocking. It's egregious. It's astounding that this is happening, and it's been going on for a month now. We just learned today that the first sightings were confirmed on November 13th over Picatinny Arsenal, which is a military research facility that goes back even a few days earlier than that we knew previously. This is astounding that nobody has any answers.
Actually, it's earlier than that, isn't it, Marek? I mean, as you know, we've been reporting on Reality Check the weird so-called drone sightings over Langley Air Force Base. I think you've reported on that as well. And there's also Eglin Air Force Base and multiple other bases all across the continental United States that have been seeing anomalous objects, which the Air Force particularly and the Department of Defense and intelligence community have been calling drones. This is a historical problem, isn't it?
Very much so. Not only does it go back several years, it goes back decades. And, I've been looking at some very fascinating old government records that I can just think of one series of incidents that J. Allen Hynek actually wrote about in his book, The UFO Experience. And there are some really astounding government documents that outline exactly what we're seeing. Unknown objects with blinking red, green, white lights hovering, moving up and down rapidly over nuclear missile silos in Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska. And oh, by the way, that exact same pattern and series of events occurred in late 2019 and 2020, where hundreds of people were seeing these objects.
Oh gosh, I'm so pleased you mentioned this. So this is the Colorado swarms, is that
Correct.
right? The Midwest swarms.
Correct.
This is really interesting to me because I've needled people in the intelligence community about those so-called swarms, which were seen by police, by military, local TV reporters, and everybody just goes, they clam up. They won't talk about it. Yeah. And I don't know why. I mean, the interesting thing is you're saying that the decades-old J. Allen Hynek sightings and the Colorado swarms, they're not just similar to, they're describing objects that are identical to these objects?
The documents, and I got to give credit to Robert Hastings, who wrote the seminal book on the nexus between UFOs and nuclear weapons, nuclear technology. These documents can be found on his website, ufohastings.com, I believe. Astounding. They outline in 1965, again, the exact same kind of flight characteristics, bright flashing lights, hovering up and down movement. But I want to quickly just drill into something, a fascinating connection that I think may tie these New Jersey incidents to the 2019, 2020 Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming incidents. And NewsNation, our favorite network, had Mayor Sam Morris from Mine Hill, New Jersey on just yesterday. And he described firsthand account. He saw this, and apparently he has video of this. And I'd love to get my hands on it. He described one stationary object, drone, whatever you want to call it, and other 4 or 5 other objects that were moving around it. And he described it as a methodical scanning pattern. Very interesting, right? So there's this one kind of mothership, if you want to use that word, and then these other drones moving around in concert or in a specific kind of trajectory around it. Now, if you look back to emails that have been released through the Freedom of Information Act, I'm going to quote directly. A Chase County, Nebraska, this is from 2019, 2020. A Chase County, Nebraska sheriff deputy reported observing 30 to 50 flying independently of each other with a larger, quote, mothership hovering for hours, directly from the memos, from the law enforcement memos. I'll do one more just very quickly. In Kansas, 2019, 2020, a law enforcement officer observed, quote, 10 to 15 drones that flew all kinds of patterns around a stationary drone, end quote. It flew right over him. He had night vision on, couldn't see it because of the bright lights, but, quote, it made absolutely no sound at all, even though the wind was calm, end quote. So that kind of, that similar flight dynamic, that pattern that we're seeing, gives me at least moderate confidence that the objects that were observed in 2019 and 2020 are the same, if not similar to what we're seeing in New Jersey now.
Marek, if the senior FBI official who's just given evidence to the Department of Homeland Security hearing in Congress, Wheeler, if he can't say what these objects are, how do we even know that they're drones?
That's a great question. He also, I will say that he went on to discuss in a second line of questioning from another member of Congress. He said that, quote, something to the effect of credible police officers and other law enforcement individuals had observed both rotary and fixed wing objects. So that gives you a sense of these being drones of some kind, based on, if we're to take him at his word, which I think we probably should, but he has claimed that these have exhibited those technologies. I would say fixed wing that's pretty astounding, that a fixed wing aircraft is not, we can't track that. We don't know where that's going. We don't know where it's coming from. That's astounding. And I don't want to bury the lead here, but I think maybe the biggest revelation from the hearing just now was that Congressman Chris Smith from New Jersey reported that a police officer observed 50 drones coming, quote, in off of the ocean a few nights ago. Congressman Smith was also in touch with the commanding officer in the Coast Guard, and he described 12 to 30 of these objects following a Coast Guard vessel, following the vessel out in the ocean. So there might be a water and ocean nexus here.
It begs the question, Marek, if it's following a Coast Guard vessel, Coast Guard vessels have radar, they
Correct.
have FLIR imaging systems, they have counter UAS technology.
Correct.
They can call in air support. What the hell is going on? One of the scenarios that you and I as journalists, you sometimes get a wink, wink, nudge, nudge tip, and I've had a few from intelligence people in the last few days, and they're all confidently asserting that this is Russian technology and that the Russians are deploying drones from over the horizon on container ships or vessels off the horizon, and that these are coming into the East Coast to cause mischief. If that's true, why are we not being told, do you believe, about let's assume that that's true, and I have to admit I'm skeptical. Why are we not being told about that?
That is you could run up and down. Again, we're going into speculation territory, and that's a great question. I don't know if it is true, and I have a hard time buying it on its face right now. Just if they're truly seeing fixed wing aircraft, those are not going to be flying off of container ships, right? Unless they have an aircraft carrier parked over there. Gosh, I think I'm fighting the premise here, just because I haven't seen any evidence of that. Nothing that I've seen points to that. But go ahead if you have something to add.
No, this is one thing I wanted to ask you, because as well as being a journalist of good repute, you've also worked in a national security role, I think, with the State Department.
Right.
Let's be open-minded here for a moment. There are occasions, especially at times of heightened international conflict, there are occasions when, for good reason, governments don't reveal all they know. They're often cautious about escalating. We know that there's been decisions made by the British and the Americans to escalate the use of weaponry, Storm Shadow missiles from the UK,
Correct.
ATACMS missiles from the United States, to allow them to be used on Russian territory.
Right.
Add to that, there's been a series of weird incidents. There's been an attack by a Chinese ship with Russian crew member on internet connections in Scandinavian waters in the Baltic Sea. There's another incident. There's a Boeing satellite that inexplicably exploded in orbit a few weeks ago. We still have not had any official comment about that, but sources are telling me it was very, very unusual that a satellite would just suddenly explode in orbit. I'm hearing that there's concern that if the United States was to name the foreign adversary power, if this is true, that's allegedly involved in deploying these drones, if this is true, the explanation is that they're worried about escalating by naming that power and by essentially accusing that power of an act of war.
Right.
There is some logic to that, if that's true, isn't there?
I agree, but I think there is an enormous political risk if that ends up being the case, and the American people find out that this was being concealed from them. That would be a colossal scandal, right? And anyway, if that scenario is true, that is just an extraordinary scandal. So, yeah, I mean, look, your guess is as good as mine. Sure, you could, the Russians have engaged in what's called hybrid warfare. They have sabotage networks. I think to your point, Ross, there was a story just a few weeks ago that they were trying to take down cargo aircraft with explosive devices. A couple of those devices actually did go off in cargo facilities. So if this were in fact a Russian psychological operation, it is an exception. It's a remarkable escalation from the deniable activities that we believe they have been doing. This is, with the bright flashing lights and the just kind of the mass amounts of these craft. I mean, 50 aircraft or 20 to 30 coming off of the ocean. That's an unbelievable escalation.
Marek, you've been very prominent in commenting on the growing preponderance of evidence to suggest that the possibility that the explanation for at least some of the anomalous objects that have been seen over the United States in the last 70 to 80 years is perhaps non-human. Are we talking potentially that these drones might in fact be a non-human intelligence?
Boy, we're touching the third rail here. It's tough to it's tough to assess, right? Because there are consistent reports of rotors, fixed wing, right, noises and capabilities that appear consistent with pretty standard human technology.
But we do know. Forgive me for interrupting there, but you and I both know about the phenomenon. In scientific papers written by people like Dr. Eric Davis, there's been descriptions of what's called mimicry, where the NHI, if it is indeed NHI, the phenomenon is able to imitate technology. The Cash Landrum incident, where allegedly a large number of helicopters were seen, and it could not possibly have been a large number of helicopters. I mean, we can't exclude the possibility, can we, that these objects, which are being called drones by the United States, at least in background briefings to journalists, can we exclude the possibility, my friend, that this is in fact some kind of mimicry by a non-human intelligence? I don't think we can.
As of I'll tell you what, before I started looking into this topic, I would have easily excluded many things. I can't exclude anything these days, right? And I think all options need to be on the table. And just to your point about mimicry, just very briefly, in 1975, there were just unbelievable incursions over nuclear facilities in the kind of the northern tier of the United States. In some instances, the objects were quiet. And this is all in declassified documents. You can read all about this. The New York Times wrote about it, and the Washington Post did a superb piece on this. It's titled "What Were Those Mysterious Craft?" And I encourage all of your listeners and viewers to read it. It came out in 1979, and it was about these 75 incidents. And in one particularly notable instance, guards and officers at these nuclear sites observed or heard what they thought was a helicopter, but it hovered over the nuclear weapons storage areas. And the quote in the government cable is that this helicopter had a quote clear intent on the nuclear weapons storage areas. So look, we can't exclude mimicry. I will just say quickly, during that string of events, there was at least one incident in Malmstrom Air Force Base, which hosts a lot of nuclear missile silos, where fighter jets were sent out to intercept some of these objects, and witnesses on the ground observed the lights on these objects going off as the jets closed. And then the lights went off.
That's exactly, funnily enough, that's what New Jersey Governor Murphy has reported.
There you go. Now you see the connections are building. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So, and to your point about the Russians doing this, look, we see that same mothership and kind of smaller objects moving. We see that same dynamic in 2019 and 2020, which is well before the Ukrainian invasion of Russia, where the Russians over Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming. Again, these actors appear to be the same, just based on these characteristics, and they seem to be consistent. So, boy, it's a hell of a mystery. I think all I can do at this point is follow the story and try to draw those linkages if they do exist and if they're reasonable.
Let's get back to the hearing. What was the reaction of the politicians to that quite ridiculous admission from Wheeler of the FBI?
I was surprised. Yeah, and we're dealing with New Jersey, and Americans are familiar with New Jerseyite are a unique bunch. They're ornery, and I expected more fireworks. Frankly, I expected more anger and outrage, frankly, at not having answers. Because again, it's been a month. How is this possible? The questioning was fairly, I think it wasn't toned down, but I think everybody is perplexed. The members of Congress are just as perplexed as the FBI, at least as they pretend to be, or as Wheeler kind of portrayed during this hearing.
Was there anybody from the Defense Department there today?
No, I don't believe so. It was the Department of Justice, FBI, and then a gentleman from I think from ICE or Border Patrol.
Why was the Department of Justice not called? I mean, one of the things that worries me about Congress is they sometimes aren't asking the right people. I mean, surely, if this is a national security issue, which it surely is, if these drones, if they are drones, are hovering over Picatinny Arsenal and other weapons facilities, why wasn't the Department of Defense called and put under oath and asked a hard question? I just don't get it. I truly do not get why people are just so tamely accepting assurances from the Defense Department that these are drones and that there's no public threat. Yeah. How can they give that assurance if we now know from what you've heard today, they have no idea what these objects are?
It is a great question, and frankly, I actually don't know if this hearing was pre-planned or if it was set up just specifically for this incident or these incidents. Excuse me, but you're right. I mean, the Defense Department has equities here. I would say, I think, and this was a question that came up in the hearing: that who's running the show here? Whose jurisdiction is this? And I suspect the FBI has the lead because this is occurring over not just military facilities; it's occurring over residential facilities, cities, critical infrastructure, which generally would be the FBI's turf, and they're clueless, completely clueless.
So there was also, as I understood it, a representative of the National Football League due to give evidence to the committee. Do you know why that is? Why on earth was the NFL called to a Homeland Security hearing about drones?
Yes, so the NFL has very significant concerns with all the games that they put on, right? And they have 50, 60, 70, 80,000 individuals in a stadium. It's not difficult, as we've seen in Syria and Ukraine. It's not difficult to leverage off-the-shelf drone technology for nefarious ends, for terrorist attacks, terrorism, for chemical weapons. We hope we don't have to ever think about that, but that is why this is what the government's job is, to think about these potential threats and proactively mitigate them. And in the case of New Jersey and all these other incidents that have occurred over the last several years, they utterly failed to even identify the operators, which is astounding to me.
So we're in this weird situation now, Merrick, where the Congress now knows that the FBI doesn't know anything. And by implication, neither does Homeland Security, and neither do any of the agencies that are supposedly there to protect both flight safety and national security. Right. Where the hell do we go from here?
And that is the $1 trillion question. And, if past and the precedent, is any kind of indication, these incursions will stop and they will pop up again, right? Right before the New Jersey incursions, there were several over 3 military bases, U.S. military bases in the UK. And the frequency seems to be picking up. Before that, we had Langley Air Force Base, 17 days where they were so perplexed that they had to request a special NASA aircraft with a very sophisticated camera system to get imagery of these things. And to my knowledge, they didn't get anything. So, gosh, I don't know what the future holds. Will these incursions continue? Will they spread? Will they stop and pop up somewhere else? All I can do is follow this and keep an open mind.
So what came out of the hearing? I mean, was there any conclusion aside from the fact that they know nothing?
I think the bottom line takeaways for me are, number one, the FBI is utterly confounded and perplexed by this. The Wheeler said that they had reviewed video evidence. They had credible sightings from police officers. So this is not all mass hysteria. And I will concede that a lot of the videos that people have posted were of helicopters or very mundane objects at close range. That's fine. But there is clearly an issue here. It's not all mass hysteria. That's abundantly clear. So bottom line's, FBI is clueless, and the sightings just described by Congressman Smith are truly astounding. I mean, 50 objects coming in off the ocean. Oh, by the way, this is where Lieutenant Ryan Graves and multiple squadrons were seeing all these objects via their sensors and occasionally with their eyeballs off the U.S. East Coast. So fascinating dynamic, and this is something I will be following very closely. I'll say one more quick thing. Look, this is a pattern. If this happens again now, and the government is caught flat-footed again, if it happens somewhere else, boy, we're in a really bad position here, because this is just egregious and it's outrageous.
Yeah, but Merrick, I don't know. I mean, you look back to the public reaction in February 2023 when the Chinese balloon incident happened, and Congress and the public, the national media, they went nuts because of one Chinese balloon that flew across the continental USA. I don't understand why multiple, as you say in some cases, 50 alleged drones coming in off the sea onto sensitive military facilities in New Jersey, why that's not an absolutely gigantic issue in all of the mainstream media. I guess I sound like a scratchy record on this, but what do you think is going on? Is the media being told to shut up?
You almost have to ask that question now, right? I'd like to think that that's not the case, but you have to ask that question. I mean, okay, the New York Times did a piece. It is being picked up. That to be fair. I mean, if you Google drones, but gosh, it is not the level of I wouldn't call it hysteria, but interest that the Chinese balloon. I think perhaps because these are identified, and if we do capture one that says made in Moscow or made in Beijing, maybe the dynamic will change, right? Because then you have a potential for a geopolitical crisis. Maybe that's what's at the root here. I don't know, but it's a very good question that I'm glad you're asking.
Politically, though, with an incoming president who's vowed to get to the bottom of the so-called deep state, with probably no love for the FBI, isn't this a bloody nightmare for the FBI that they can't provide an explanation for what is potentially the biggest national security crisis in recent years?
And oh, by the way, Ross, these sightings were in the very near proximity to Trump's Bedminster, New Jersey golf club. So yes, absolutely. I don't know if there's any kind of symbolism there, or if that is intentional, but that is, you bring up a good point. It has all the makings of a heck of a storm.
One thing for sure, Marek von Rennenkamp, the next few weeks are going to be very rocky and very interesting, especially as the inauguration approaches in late January. Marek von Rennenkamp from The Hill, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your insights on today's Homeland Security Committee hearing.
Thanks so much, Ross. Always great to speak with you.
So as we've heard from Marek, this is a phenomenon that hasn't just happened in the last couple of weeks. It doesn't just go back months. It doesn't just go back years. It goes back decades. This is a phenomenon of unexplained objects hovering over sensitive United States facilities, often being ignored by the official government agencies that are responsible for protecting our security. The big question that comes out of tonight's episode is, what is the President, Congress, the Defense Department, Homeland Security, the FBI, and every other government agency going to do about it? There is clearly a national security issue raised by what we've discussed tonight. There's clearly a flight safety issue raised. We don't know yet for sure whether the UAP, the phenomenon of unexplained anomalous phenomena, is in any way connected with the objects that we're seeing over New Jersey and other parts of the United States and the United Kingdom. But we're allowed to ask. And tomorrow, you're going to hear from a local on the ground in New Jersey. You're going to hear from the Tedesco brothers, John and Jerry Tedesco. And we're also going to give you the opportunity to ask me your questions. So join us again on Reality Check tomorrow night for what is this two-part special series on the drones debacle, the crisis unfolding in our skies over the United States and indeed most of the planet. What the hell is it? Keep on watching, because NewsNation's going to take you there. The rest of the mainstream media might be ignoring this issue, but we're there like a dog on a bone, and we're going to cover this issue whether they like it or not. And we're going to try and get you answers. Thank you for joining us. G'day and welcome to Reality Check. Before we start this week's show, a quick word about this week's sponsor. Dr. Amy Lee, she's a US board-certified physician and expert nutritionist, sharing her warning about 3 harmful foods she'd like you to be aware of. She says these foods cause weight gain, they clog your digestive tract, they deplete your energy, and they wreck your skin. In fact, they're banned in other countries, but not in America. She's got a new video art which you can watch at 3harmfulfoods.com/Ross. That's numeral 3 harmfulfoods.com/Ross. Dr. Lee details how to spot and avoid these foods so you can experience easier weight loss, smooth digestion, and vibrant energy. We're linking to the video below, but once again, that link is 3harmfulfoods.com/Ross. Now let's get on with this week's show. Welcome back to Reality Check. Once again, I'm in Egypt. And boy, it's been an amazing experience. It's full of mysteries, this place. The biggest mystery is the advanced technology that lies behind the magnificent structures like the Great Pyramid of Giza. 138 meters of limestone blocks. How did a civilization that didn't actually have the wheel, only had copper tools if they were lucky, build such a gigantic object?
It's only when you walk around the Great Pyramid of Giza and look up its steep sides and you realize what a feat of workmanship it was for whatever era it was that it was built in. If you accept that it was built say 5,500 years ago, at the very beginnings of the dynastic Egyptian pharaohic civilization, it was an incredible accomplishment. Because not only is it level to perfection, the sides straight to perfection, it's just a mammoth engineering task. And I struggle to see how we could replicate it today. I mean, it is massive. It's awe-inspiring. And like most of Egypt, there's a mystery behind its construction. We just can't explain the technologies that were used to build it. It suggests very strongly that there was perhaps a prior advanced civilization that we don't know about. So have a look at this lump of basalt sitting here in front of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's perfectly cut, absolutely perfectly cut at a 90-degree angle. And it looks like something's gone right through this gigantic lump of basalt, and I can't explain how we would cut that today without a very strong diamond-tipped saw. So how did either dynastic Egyptian civilization, which I think is unlikely, or a far earlier ancient civilization cut a block of basalt like this? Got any answers for me, JP?
Pull them out my hat.
So, well, meet JP Haig, my good friend, a lawyer from Mauritius, who also happens to have an interest in the esoteric. Where are we, JP?
Well, Roscoe, it doesn't take a million guesses to find out that we are outside Menkaure Pyramid, the smallest of the three pyramids on the Giza Plateau. It's the only pyramid of the three that I've not actually entered, like yourself. And I'm excited to see what's inside.
So I'm told that that gouge in the side of Menkaure is because of the son of Saladin in 1200 and something. They tried dismantling the pyramid on Dad's instructions, and apparently it took them ages and ages, and they weren't able to achieve it. And a lot of the stones that they dismantled it from are still sort of scattered at the bottom of the pyramid. And it really does beg the question, if they had so much difficulty disassembling the pyramid, how in God's name did they build it 5,000 plus years ago?
It's a good question.
Do you know, it's funny, JP, I have a really strong sense that what we're doing right now is exactly what people were doing 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago. This has been a perennial thing, coming to these pyramids, and yet it's a huge mystery.
Yeah.
How the hell did they build these things?
But they're just, I mean, the term iconic comes to mind, and there's something archetypal about them. There is a sacred geometry to the shape of the pyramid. It represents the divine, the creator.
Come later? Need a later, sir?
Later, thank you. And even the camels and their riders are God's creation, like us.
I love it.
Yeah.
What's that middle pyramid there called?
This is Khafren Pyramid. Obviously meant to be named after the king that's associated with it as a tomb, but much like the Great Pyramid and indeed this one, I don't think these were tombs at all. I think they are multiple layers of merging of science, technology, spirituality, aestheticism. Absolutely incredible. And they're tapping a divine geometry that we have lost or forgotten about in our current times. And I personally think that they were initiatic centers for priest initiates to access the unseen. And what I mean by that is extrasensory type information that requires a degree of cultivation and inherent ability. Very difficult to prove, but you know, I often think about the story of Napoleon inside the Great Pyramid. Apparently there's a sort of a myth or folklore that he was initiated into the Freemasons inside the Great Pyramid of Khufu, which is just behind us, and allegedly initiated by the Count of Saint-Germain, who's an interesting character associated with the ideas of philosophical death, the idea of immortality within the human form, the human body, And apparently he spent the night inside the pyramid and received the vision of his Waterloo to come. And lo and behold, he came out the next day and apparently was as pale, as white as the driven snow.
Love it. So, let's get in there, JP.
Let's do it, Ross.
Morning.
I have the ticket.
So you don't think this was a sarcophagus at all?
No, I think they were initiatic type centers, devices, designed to act on human consciousness, connecting with something greater than the self.
Oh God, this is where I regret being so poor.
Yep. Take my glasses off. Oh, this isn't too bad compared to some of them. Now, when we enter the Great Pyramid at night, we're going to have full access to the entire pyramid, which means the subterranean chamber.
Yep.
And that is pretty difficult to get down into. You have to crawl down on your belly to get in there.
So really there's no evidence at all that these were sarcophagi?
No, they just happen to be granite boxes that are there, and the assumption made that they were tombs for kings, which of course doesn't exclude the fact that bodies could have been put there after the pyramids were built, thousands of years before.
So you think there's a more plausible explanation that these are somehow some kind of, an amplifier, a communications device?
Yeah, I think there were initiatic centers, highly complex, that were built for an initiatic and as well as a functional purpose, and it deals with this idea of the invisible coming into contact with the material world.
And do you really think they're just 5,500 years old?
My speculation is they're far older, Ross.
So, JP, the thing I find most perplexing is looking around at these walls. I mean, supposedly this was built 5,000 plus years ago. How the hell did they do this with what they had at the time, which was stone and copper adzes?
I just don't think it's a plausible explanation, and particularly in the timescales that the pyramids were supposedly built in. How did they maneuver all the granite and limestone all the way here?
I mean,
how did they perfectly fit?
I mean, they're perfectly square walls, you know. How do you do this with a bronze adze?
Yeah. These were master masons in the fullest sense. And I think the techniques and the organization around it has to have been so much more complex than we can imagine. I don't buy all the kind of maneuvering through wooden logs and sort of mass production through chain manufacturing and so on.
The thing I find amazing about this, JP, is it's a mystery in plain sight. I mean, you look at these buildings, constructions, whatever you call them.
Edifices.
And I don't think we could build this today.
With difficulty, not in this manner.
So how did they build it 4, 5, 6,000 plus years ago?
Probably with techniques and knowledge that we are just out of touch with right now. And in isolation, it's highly questionable and debatable. But when you look at Egypt as a whole and some of the sites and the perfection of the cutting, the smooth boring of granite and laser-like sheet cutting of the granite as well, you have to ask yourself, at what point in time did this come in, and what were the construction and Masonic techniques used? Because there is a disconnect between the official Egyptological narrative and the reality on the ground, that those with eyes that see.
A mystery in plain sight.
Exactly.
Here we are, the ancient Sphinx. Hello, darling.
Put your head in there. If there's a resonance, you hear a resonance that goes like.
Okay, in I go. Oh, yeah. It's like a throbbing V8 engine. I hope that comes through on the microphone. How extraordinary. You hear a resonance, a throbbing, like an engine deep inside the building. What an extraordinary thing. So here we are at the Maidum Pyramid, about 2 hours out of Cairo, and it's massive, absolutely huge. Get a load of this, absolutely gigantic. It's a weird shape. And unfortunately, there's a lot of stairs. Okay, here we go. My next pyramid. It's a long way down. Actually, it's not too bad. It's not as low as the last one I climbed in. And there's a very helpful handrail. Well polished by lots of frightened tourists. Oh my goodness me. So here we are, deep underneath the Maidum Pyramid. All very Raiders of the Lost Ark. You wouldn't want to have a fear of confined spaces coming in here. It's pretty tight. Ah, so this is the burial tomb. It's a bit of an anticlimax, to be perfectly honest.
Because it's not.
I mean, you'd be pretty upset if you were a grave robber and you come all the way down here and there's nothing in here. So imagine you're an enterprising grave robber, it's 1000 AD, you chip your way through tons of limestone looking for the treasure of the emperor's burial chamber, and you find this. I mean, really. You know, one of the hassles of climbing pyramids is you've got to get out of them again. Have a look at this. Oh my goodness. JP, what was that about UFOs in this pyramid?
Well, apparently there were sightings of UFOs appearing over the pyramid and around the area between the years of 1986 and 2016, which is a 30-year period, pretty long.
What's this pyramid called?
This is called the Lahun Pyramid.
Lahun.
Apologies, yeah.
Lahun.
Lahun.
And it's mud bricks over limestone rocks. Why would UFOs be attracted to this area in particular?
Oh, pre-dynastic happenings, I would suspect. Maybe we don't understand what the use of this site was or who was here. But
maybe you're drawn to the energy or something.
That's what I was going to say, because actually I can feel it right now.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, it's a very positive, uplifting energy, and I think it was kind of fitting that we saw 2 buses full of beautiful school children that were happy to see us outside.
Gorgeous. They were lovely kids.
Beautiful. The innocence of the child. Just love it.
So we're here at Abydos, which is the Temple of Osiris. And I'm told here is some of the most spectacular art that really does raise intriguing questions about just exactly what was going on in our prehistory here in ancient Egypt. Let's go and have a look.
Okay, let's put this debate away. Why Osiris? Why not Ra? Why not Amun? Why not? Because Osiris is the one who was killed, died, and came back to life. So Osiris here means what? resurrection. So the ancient Egyptians, the dynastics, when they found that the power of this place are similar or a reason for resurrection, so they give it this title, Osiris Temple.
So I'm currently crawling down a very narrow staircase into what's called the main crypt of the Dendara temple, where there is the Dendara light bulb, and you have to squeeze down into a very narrow space, which I'll just show you. It's quite extraordinary.
Ross, you'll be rescuing me.
Here we go. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness me. It's about 2 feet high, that little hole. I think they were tiny little fellas, those Egyptians, or they had a sense of humour. Yeah. So here we are, we're still going down this path. Oh, look at this, the luxury of it. We've got a capacity to stand up. So it's funny actually, you'd think it would be really cold down here with the stone, but it's actually incredibly hot. Super warm.
We've got 4 pillars with Hathor as the cow.
And
so we're looking at light, frequency, and sound resonance.
Look at that. That looks like electricity being represented.
It does. It looks like energy, and we've got light and sound represented. And the sound is supported by a pillar, but underneath, supporting the sound is light.
Sound, light, and frequency.
And look, we have the physicality, the temple or temples being raised by these strands or cords of energy that are emanating from another source or pillar of some kind.
So do you think that's a literal representation of a technology, or do you think I'm being too literal?
No, I mean, if we look at the depictions that were in the second hall when we arrived, we see a physical movement of the temple being physically levitated off the floor, because we can see it being lifted off the floor. It's not touching the floor, which is very, very clearly kind of delineated. And here we've got some interaction between the spectrum of light, sound. Hathor obviously represents frequency and resonance, and then waves of energy, which you see in the celestial zodiac in Aquarius.
That one really gets me.
Yeah.
I mean, if ever you were going to represent electricity contained within a vessel, that's it.
That's it.
Actually, you can see a light, and you can see a cable going into it, can't you?
It looks like technology is all I'd say.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, it's hard to escape the idea that that's something electrical, but maybe we're, what's it called? Pareidolia. Maybe we're putting our human impressions onto objects, onto symbology.
Absolutely.
Or maybe it's technology.
Maybe nothing.
So this is in the temple of Dendara, and these are what look like light bulbs. It's amazing to be here in the Valley of the Kings, which is where many of the pharaohs were buried in secret, with a huge number of the incredible treasures, the things that Howard Carter described when he found the tomb of Tutankhamun as wonderful things. But there's a mystery, there's a conundrum behind that whole story. Who on earth made these incredible technologies, these fine stone vases, the beautiful carved statuary, the incredibly well-honed granite blocks that are accurate, sometimes within micromillimeters? How do we explain those technologies with what we understand were the tools of that era? The pre-dynastic Egyptian civilizations, if they were lucky at all, had copper chisels. More likely, they had flints and stone adzes. Then how do we explain the beautiful objects, the wonderful things that Howard Carter described when he opened the tomb of Tutankhamun? So we're going down into the tomb of Ramses III, deep underground in the Valley of the Kings. And not surprisingly, because it's a nice cool time of year here in Egypt, it's like Grand Central Station at rush hour. But it's still pretty special coming down here and knowing that what we're standing in is a building that was built at least thousands of years ago. And there's a real question mark about this whole claim about this civilization that existed here, was it actually the tombs of the pharaohs that it was built for? Or was it perhaps built for another purpose and then reused by the pharaohs later on? That's the theory we're exploring. I can only imagine what it must have been like for the early explorers to rediscover these tombs and realise that what they'd stumbled across was the tomb of an ancient king. But the real question mark is, was this originally conceived as the tomb of an ancient king, or did it perhaps have an even earlier purpose? I have to admit, it does tend to destroy the beauty of experiencing these tombs, or whatever they are, to share them with thousands and thousands of other people. But you do get an incredibly profound sense of just how old these places are. I mean, if you think about what they estimate, it's at least 4,000 or 5,000 years old. And if you listen to the experts we're talking to on this tour, it's possibly tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of years old. It's a mystery in plain sight.
There's a blue deity for you.
A blue deity?
Yes.
And there's one of my blue guy friends.
Huh?
Hey, blue guys. Tell me your secret. Here I am heading down into the tomb of another ancient king, perhaps on my own journey into the afterlife. Deep, deep, deep under the Valley of the Kings. It's absolutely massive, this place. You should see it. Incredible to think that these drawings, these paintings are thousands of years old. And so here's an ancient sarcophagus carved out of what looks like solid granite. Now, are you telling me they made that with copper chisels? I'm sorry, I strongly doubt it. I have a really strong sense in this place that all the carvings, the hieroglyphics, and indeed perhaps even the sarcophagus came a lot later. This really feels like a room that it was built for another purpose. So the conventional view in modern Egyptology is that all of these pharaohic tombs in the Valley of the Kings were actually built by the dynastic Egyptians during the period of the pharaohs. But there's a growing possibility, speculation, and it's really only speculation at this stage, that these tombs aren't really tombs at all, that they might in fact have been here before the dynastic Egyptians arrived on the scene, and maybe they used these existing cave tunnel structures for their own purposes, to bury their pharaohs. And it begs the question, who built these tunnels? Who had the capacity to hew great lumps of granite and cut it to often micromillimeter accuracy? Is the alleged sarcophagus deep inside the tomb I've just visited, is it really a burial sarcophagus, or is it something else? That's the question. Are we misunderstanding a lot of what we take for granted as accepted truths about modern Egypt? I think this one's called Sathap. Forgive me for the mispronunciation, which I'm sure I've done. But the interesting thing about this is that it's uncompleted. Looks less and less like a pharaohic burial chamber. Was this really a burial chamber for a pharaoh originally? Or was it designed for some other purpose? Certainly it's uncompleted. I'm not so sure, and neither are the experts we're talking to. They think these caverns may have been here before and were adapted for purpose by the pharaohs. And maybe, just maybe, these supposedly sarcophagi aren't sarcophagi at all. So riddle me this, explain this to me. Have a look at the hieroglyphic scratchings on the end of what they say is a burial sarcophagus.
And if you have a look, I'm just going to turn my camera around. You see these almost like chicken scratchings into the end of the granite sarcophagus. And whoever it was that did these etchings clearly only had the copper chisels of the time in dynastic Egypt. And they were struggling to etch into the granite. So whoever it was that crafted this entire sarcophagus, if that's what it was, had the ability to cut granite in ways that even the experts admit they can't explain for what the tools were in modern dynastic Egypt. It's the best sort of mystery, a riddle in plain sight. There's no getting over it. These gigantic dolomite granite statues are completely beyond comprehension. There is no way humans built these. Simple as that. Even the official Egypt archaeological explanation can't provide an answer for how humans of the era built these statues in the pre-dynastic civilization. So that's at least 12,000 years ago. It's a mystery sitting here in the obvious plain, and nobody can explain it. And thousands of tourists walk past every day and don't ask that question. If it wasn't the known human civilization that did it, who did do it? You think a machine? You think some kind of machine built that?
Some kind of machines and some kind of like an operating system for the machine. Okay, because that's the operating system guiding the machine to do that perfection. Okay, this operating system is made by humans or made by AI. I don't think it's only humans, because the humans will not make such perfection.
And what's the minimum age that that statue would be?
Well, I will tell you when we go inside, but most of the statues we're having here are more pre-Diluvians. The word pre-Diluvian could mean a lot for us, but we can give an age to most of the monuments from the pre-Diluvian times. Mostly they are over 12,000 years old. Okay? But how old exactly? I think most of these were being made during the time of Shimisu. Most of the statues, especially the statues, they were made during the time of Shimisu. And Shimisu is about 20,000 to 12,000 years back. Okay? Why they made statues? To remember the first humans who brought the civilization to Earth. Okay? These statues are not for Ramses II, or Amenhotep II, or any of the dynastic kings. There are some statues, yes, from the dynastic times, but not the red granite or the granodiorite. Like these statues are over 200 tons, okay, 200 to 300 tons. This one is up to 200 tons. Of course, we can't understand that humans with primitive techniques, and also even by our ways of thinking with our advanced techniques now, we can't understand how humans could able to do this.
So when scientists did a laser scan of this amazing granite dolomite statue, one of the hardest stones in the world, they were absolutely astonished, because the head is absolutely symmetrical. If you put a line down the middle of the head and go to the eyes, go to the ears, everything perfectly matches. I think we'd be hard-pressed to replicate that today. And yet, from what the tour is telling me, this statue is probably over 10,000 years old, minimum. It's suggestive of an unknown, possibly human civilization that existed here, that it explains the technology. I mean, who had the tools to be able to carve dolomite, granite? All round this ancient temple of Karnak, there are the most amazing blocks of granite, basalt, alabaster, and they've been cut to tolerances that I suspect we'd struggle to replicate today. This needle is hundreds of tons, and it's cut out of one piece of solid granite. I mean, it's breathtaking. I look around and the mystery is in plain sight. There's a conundrum. How do we explain how these objects were built? This is the Temple of Karnak.
And this was given as a title to Min Khibra, the stable form of the sun. This was the name of a king called Tutmosis III. So what does it mean here? In my opinion, the secret keeper of the technology of the stargates. So he, the one, could activate the stargate. Originally, this was one piece. The whole room was made from one block. Okay? If you look carefully, you can see this wall was connected with the ceiling. Can you see the connection? But it was destroyed. Okay? Here, the ceiling was connected to here, and this was connected to the door jambs. Also, the other side. Okay? So I know for sure, and from another example, we're going to see it later, that this was one giant block of alabaster. Okay? When we talk about cutting limestone, and we think it is easy, and alabaster is easy, and we talk about cutting granite, okay, which is hard, actually, we can also flip the meaning. How? To cut granite, it is super hard because it is very hard material, so you need very high machine, very high technology, okay? But I can tell you, if we use what we call it a tool with so much vibration, granite can stand against this vibration, okay? So if you have a mechanical drill and you are drilling on granite, the piece will not shatter easily, even with this force. But if you do this on limestone or alabaster, one little vibration can break it like glass. So here is the problem. It is not super hard to cut, but it is super sensitive. And you can see these lines. Can you see these lines? These are deposits above each other. Here, look what happened. So if I have now any pressure, I put any pressure here, it will separate this line. So all the stories about using primitive techniques, even it doesn't fit. Why? Because they are under the ground. So they must have machines. And when you cut this piece from under the ground, okay, then you try to find a way to take it out.
Without breaking
okay?
it.
Without breaking it, of course. Okay? And then from that level, the story in Egyptology will start about how to take it outside the quarry. So they keep talking about how they cut this in deep level and then take it outside this groove or this cave.
Here we are in Edfu Temple. It's quite special. It's also crowded. Beautiful sandstone walls covered with incredible hieroglyphics, including hieroglyphics of what looks like a temple being levitated. All around Egypt there are intriguing little hints that the Egyptians in ancient times had abilities, perhaps, that we don't have today. One of the things that is suggested from the hieroglyphs is the possibility that they developed the art of levitation. Have a look at this. What you see there is a cord apparently lifting a temple off the ground. And some of the scientists believe that what this is an example of some kind of levitation ability. I'm reserving judgment, but whatever it is, it's pretty intriguing.
There was a connection between this lady and the stars, especially her outfit in some places is decorated with a lot of scenes, looks like stars, and sometimes I believe they look like the flower of life, okay? And after they fix the boundaries of the temple, here they are fixing exactly where the temple will be built. So it was not being done by the king only. There is someone celestial has to choose the location of the temple. If you remember, Muhammad was telling you that temples are out of many elements, okay? The alignment and also the location are the most important elements in building temples. After that, the man is pouring water, but I don't think it's water on the ground of the temple, because water is mostly represented like waves, like this one, okay? But this one is not like water, okay? This one seems like the dots we have seen surrounding the temple outside. And we have also here kind of what we studied. These are the foundation offerings, not the foundation offerings. These are devices to help for the levitation process. Okay? Yeah, because we are controlling gravity by these kind of devices. Okay? It's not something like the energy wave you're surrounding the temple. There should be an opposite energy underneath the temple, so they make that kind of levitation. So they start with these. This is adding kind of like chemicals or something like that, which is giving the energy or catalyze the energy of these things here on the ground. And after that, surrounding the temple with the field of energies like the one we have seen outside, and that causes what causes this.
Ah, that's the levitation.
That's the levitation. Wi-Fi and a muffin. Okay? Of course, that's ridiculous. Okay? Just similar to the lamp of Dandara. Okay? Unfortunately, some people are being fooled with these interpretations. They are not having like a kind of logic evidence for that. Okay, what I think we are having here, that's a kind of basket. What we have studied, that's reps of meat. Okay, reps of an animal, so it refers to meat, but I don't think so, because there's some spaces between these lines. Okay, so what is that exactly? I think it was a basket.
So here at the temple of Kombu Ombo, there are more mysteries in plain sight. I mean, quite apart from the fact that this is exquisitely carved rock, there's just a simple practicality. How did a civilization that was essentially not long out of flint adzes and stone adzes, capable of lifting gigantic stone beams like this one? I mean, it's breathtaking. They're absolutely monstrous. They must be 20 to 50 tons. And there's dozens of them all over this building. I've got to hand it to Egypt. It's pretty bloody spectacular. So here's one of the biggest mysteries of all, what's called the unfinished obelisk in Aswan in southern Egypt. It's the quarry where all the red granite that was found further north came from. We don't know how they got that granite up the Nile River, and we sure as hell don't know how they moved objects as large as this one. Have a look at this. This is the unfinished obelisk. It's absolutely massive. Carved out of one lump of granite. It's absolutely gigantic. It still sits embedded in the granite bedrock, and it's enormous. The cuts are almost 90 degrees accurate, and when you look very closely, like look here, you can see what look like scoop marks in the granite. Now, nobody can really explain where those scoop marks came from. They're sure as hell not explained by men with stone adzes. It's a mystery that nobody has ever been able to solve. So here's a mystery. Have a look at this part of the obelisk. You can see they've tried, probably in dynastic times, to cut a smaller lump of granite out of this big unfinished obelisk. And they failed. They couldn't do it. So a later civilization came to this obelisk and tried to cut a slab out of it and failed, which all begs the question, who was it who cut this gigantic obelisk? Who cut this gigantic obelisk before dynastic Egypt? JP, I see a gigantic lump of granite, an almost incomprehensibly large lump of granite. It must be hundreds and hundreds of tons.
Yep, it's a mystery that something so large can be shaped, sculpted, and effectively excavated from this rose granite, which is harder than steel. And you know, the only evidence that we're being given is that hard rocks were used over hundreds of years.
I think that's hilarious.
It is funny.
Using hard rocks to chip away something as accurate as this unfinished obelisk.
Yeah, I think this is beyond 2001, A Space Odyssey. I think advanced tooling was used. My speculation would be sonic tools that could effectively resonate the granite at such a high frequency that it would probably been disintegrated into dust and it being lead, which could explain why you see these kind of ice cream scoop marks, which are so smooth and perfect.
I guess the other question is, how on earth would they have lifted something as large as this out of this quarry and transported it up the river to wherever they wanted to move it?
Exactly, and when you think about it, the depictions in Edfu Temple on the Nile, in Komombo, and indeed even in Dendera Temple, the Temple of Hathor, where we see this, these beings, these kings, effectively using some kind of energy lines that lift or raise the temple. In one image, you can see the temple is affixed to the ground. In the next image, you see a field around the temple, and it's depicted as being lifted from the ground.
So you think they had levitation?
It would make sense. The only question is how.
So get a load of this absolutely massive lump of red granite, one of the hardest stones in the world. Now, this is probably pre-dynastic Egypt. Our tour guide is suggesting that it's possibly older than 12,800 years old. Now, that civilization, according to archaeologists, didn't have even metal tools. That's pre-copper tools. But look how accurately this incredible unfinished obelisk has been cut. Almost 90-degree cuts. And the weird thing about it is these strange scoop marks in the granite. I mean, seriously, I don't know anything about rocks or cutting rocks, but the idea that they used a stone like this to cut this is utterly absurd. So the suggestion from Egyptology is that is what they did to smooth and cut the rock.
Yes, which is frankly a caveman-like explanation that draws images from 2001 Space Odyssey in the opening scenes.
300,000 years later.
Yeah, still going strong. Believe in the process.
I'm done now.
Trust me.
So here's another mystery. We're on Elephantine Island. And Elephantine Island is the site of the most extraordinary lumps of solid diorite granite, one of the hardest stones in the world. And these objects are supposedly pre-Diluvian, which means they're older than 12,800 years old, before known human civilization. And yet, have a look at them. Look at the accuracy of the cutting. I don't think a culture that had stone adzes and flint adzes could possibly have created these. This is what they look like. Absolutely extraordinary. Absolutely perfect right angles cut into one of the strongest stones in the world. And it's like this whole area, it's as if a whole bomb has gone off. These things have been thrown aside in what looks like some kind of massive explosion. And this is the pièce de résistance, a near intact box that is exquisitely cut out of diorite. Actually, no, that's red granite. still an extremely hard rock. And this was supposedly made 12,800 years ago in the pre-dynastic civilization. Nobody can explain how something like this box was carved out of solid red granite. It's just a mystery. And what caused it to be thrown aside like this? Look inside there and see those perfect 90-degree lines. That is an exquisitely cut stone box that would be a challenge to do even today, let alone 12,800 years ago.
You see the circular cut there as well.
Absolutely, yeah, there's obviously a cut for doors. That is extraordinary. And there's not, the other thing, JP, I notice is there's no striations in the granite. It doesn't look like somebody's used a saw.
No.
You only have to come here to the Egyptian Museum to realise there is a mystery in plain sight in ancient Egypt. How were exquisite objects like these gigantic stone statues carved out of dolomite, how were they fashioned? Here's another beautiful example of the dilemma, the mysterious dilemma in the Cairo Museum. Among fairly simply crafted pottery vases, there are these absolutely exquisite stone vases, and they are absolutely magnificent. Carved out of solid granite, they defy explanation. Have a look. These are absolutely beautiful objects that, on analysis, Ben van Kerkwijk told us the other week, on analysis they show perfect symmetrical form. And they can't have been turned on a wheel because those lugs would have blocked any lathe. How do you explain perfection in such an object that is literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of years old? And there are vases like this all over the museum here, indeed all over Egypt, and they're next to fairly ordinary pottery that frankly doesn't pass muster in comparison. Clearly there was some kind of an advanced civilization that was capable of building these beautiful objects, and they sit here in this museum very much unexplained. All over this incredible museum there are objects that just defy explanation. None better than this small little box in a corner of the museum showing stone pottery pots, or stone pots, that simply are inexplicable. That object up there is something carved out of granite. Stone vessels. They're stone vases, or vases as you say in America. And a lot of the elite of Egypt were buried with these vases, as Ben van Kerkwijk told us the other week. But the big issue is, did they really make them? Because the analysis that's been done by Ben and Chris Dunn, the noted engineer, suggests that these vases are accurate to a point of absurdity within thousandths of a millimetre. And they also follow precise divine mathematical ratios. How did a pre-dynastic civilization, or even an Egyptian dynastic civilization, create something as exquisite as this? That's solid stone. Here in the Cairo Museum, the schist disc is one of the most extraordinary objects in the collection. Carved out of a really hard stone called schist, it looks like some kind of industrial fan. There's really no explanation for how an ancient civilization could have carved this object. It's extraordinary. Have a look. It's the weirdest looking object. The best that they've been able to offer on the explanation on the side of the box here is it's a vessel from a high official's tomb. This unusually shaped object comes from the tomb of Sabu,
a high official serving the First Dynasty kings Den and Ajib. They suggest it might have been used for royal or religious ceremonies, either as part of an offering tray or as support for a vessel or a basket. So it was found in the tomb of Sabu. The big question is, was it really crafted in the reign of Sabu? The best theories have it that this is actually pre-dynastic, tens of thousands of years old, crafted by some civilization we just don't know about. And that's the huge dilemma. All over this beautiful museum, there are objects that defy explanation. If you accept that the technology of the era was stone, flints, adzes, or a little bit later, perhaps copper chisels, how do you explain the perfection in many of the objects in this museum? It really does defy explanation.
JP, I see a big granite box. Tell me about it.
Well, it seems from the Egyptologists that we've spoken to that they're not actually shown or educated about this particular box, which is probably the most intriguing of all of the granite objects here in the Old Cairo Museum.
So the official story says that this is an unfinished sarcophagus of Orjigeth, the king's son, and they place it at 4th Dynasty King Khufu about 551-2528 BC.
Yeah, so this is the pharaoh that the Great Pyramid is named after, purely based on a very questionable cartouche that was found in one of the chambers there by a military guy called Vai, who'd been found guilty of political fraud in the UK. So, on that note, let's actually have a look at the cutting techniques, for which there are no explanations given other than its soaring.
Look at that.
And you can see this perfect sheet cut at the rear that goes on both sides of this slab. And, there's a 90-degree angle that rubs against the main box itself.
So even though they say here that the official story is that this is from Khufu's sons too, you think it's a lot older?
I think that's what a number of Egyptologists are thinking based on what they've seen in other areas of the country, and even some of the objects here that just seem to be far better than contemporary objects in the dynastic period.
I mean, that looks like... can you see striations in the rock there? Is there any indication that there's a circular saw being used?
None. It's as smooth as you like.
So how the hell did they cut that?
That is the question.
I mean, even if it was dynastic Egypt didn't have mechanical saws.
No, and
this is solid red granite.
This is harder than steel, and you can't use copper chisels on this material. No organic matter, as we know, would be able to achieve this kind of cutting and smooth result. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And the incredible thing is, Ross, is this is probably one of the most important pieces in the museum, but it's hidden at the back against a very narrow wall where, people are going to miss this. Because the most interesting side is against this...
I mean, here we are, we're in the main foyer of the museum, and lots of people are walking past completely unaware of this box.
That's right.
And yet, what it shows is clearly some kind of advanced technology.
More than reasonable to say. Beautiful object.
A mystery. Wow. And look, the thing that really gets me is it's almost mirror smooth.
Yeah. There's no sign of any cutting tool at all.
I love the fact that you can get up close and personal with these things.
Yeah.
So, you're not much bloody use, JP. You haven't told me the answer.
I wish I had the answer.
Basically, I mean, to not sound frivolous, what we're talking about here is an ancient technology that we just don't understand.
That's right, and my speculation is it's probably acoustic or sonic cutting tools that are literally fragmenting the material into dust, and it just produces this beautiful smooth finish because there's no cutting.
But isn't it incredible that it's sitting here in the Cairo Museum, and it's actually the mystery behind it is unacknowledged.
Completely. And as mentioned, Egyptologists aren't given any real explanation other than it was a sawing technique, but there's no real evidence for the fact that it was a saw.
So let's just explain to our audience, all they had, even in 2551 BC, the time of King Coulthart, was, if they were lucky, copper chisels.
Something along those lines.
Or maybe stone flint.
Stones that were used to cut away, but it would have been very inefficient.
I don't think we could quite get to that level of 90-degree accuracy using stones.
I agree.
Okay, looks pretty normal from the front. Yeah, looks pretty normal from the front. Well, let's just have a look behind.
And then the rest of the pharaonic depictions?
Yeah, that's pretty normal, isn't it?
The depictions are just very nice.
Now, these very weird statues appear in the Cairo Museum without any explanation at all. And these elongated heads aren't explained at all. They're quite beautiful. But who made them? Nobody can explain. That's the cool thing about ancient Egypt. There's objects like this, and nobody even bothers to explain them in the biggest museum in the country. Maybe they can't. Or maybe it's an inconvenient explanation. So here we are walking through the Egyptian Museum, and what we're actually looking for are artifacts that are anomalous, that deviate from the accepted official history. And more often than not, they're tucked away in discreet corners without any explanation. And here's one of them. So the museum itself admits that these vases are from what it quaintly calls the archaic period, which is essentially pre-dynastic pharaohic Egypt, around about 10,000 plus years. And if you look at these objects, they're stone vases carved out of some of the toughest stones known on this planet. Diorite, basalt. How did a civilization that didn't have the wheel, that didn't have even copper chisels, craft something like this? A beautiful vase that is no doubt mathematically symmetrical, carved out of some kind of dark stone, be it basalt or granite or diorite, whatever it is, it's tougher than the tools they had in the day to be able to cut it. So I'd like to welcome Mohammed Ibrahim to Reality Check. He's an Egyptologist with incredible knowledge and experience based on many, many years' work here in Egypt, studying the ancient ruins and, more importantly, the ancient technologies that must have been used to craft the beautiful statuary and objects that we've seen on our tour here. There's a mystery, a conundrum in plain sight. And I'm hoping Mohammed Ibrahim can explain to me what lies behind that mystery. So I'm doing this with my camera on the road, a one-man band. I'm just about to switch across to Mohammed. Mohammed, welcome to Reality Check. I'm just going to put you on active track so I have your face in the right shot. Perfect. Tell me, what is the conventional view about when the pyramids, for example, were constructed?
Okay, before I answer the question, we must say that unfortunately, so many of our information and our theories about ancient Egypt came from history. And written history can be faked easily, either by the ancients or by the modern. Okay, so when it comes about the pyramids, because of history, they say that the pyramid was built in Dynasty 4 during what we call it dynastic Egypt. So we talk about around 2600 BC. Mm-hmm. And by the way, sometimes history also is not the problem. It is the lack of written history. Because in this case, when we don't find much information, then we put assumption. And unfortunately, most of the cases, the assumption is always wrong.
So let's talk about specifics. Let's look, for example, at those beautiful stone vases that we've looked at in the museums and in some of the locations that we've visited. Those are exquisite objects carved from the finest, hardest granite.
Right.
I mean, as I understand it, you need
something more than a copper chisel to be able to shape something like that. What do we know about the civilization that archaeology tells us existed at that time in Egypt? And how does that compare to the level of technological sophistication that you see in those objects?
These sophisticated jars, and what I call it fancy jars, were found in the tombs of what we call them pre-dynastic Egyptians. And pre-dynastic Egyptians, all the academics, including us, the alternative speakers, we know that they were primitive people. They were survivors from an earlier disaster, and they were developing very, very basic tools and technology. And it's no way to believe that they can do such vases. But what happened? That when they started to talk about these vases, that was almost 150 years ago.
Right.
So technology 150 years ago was not the same level like we have nowadays. So in my own opinion, that was the problem. That was the thing caused this kind of wrong information. That 150 years ago, there was no computers like we do now. There is no mechanical machines.
But clearly, those vases, I've got a bee in my bonnet about them. There is no way you could make that with a copper chisel.
Of course. And as I keep saying all the time, even at that time, pre-dynastic, there was no copper chisel. So even if we...
So all they had were flint tools?
Flint tools, wooden tools, ivory tools, some kind of nails, tools.
And yet the groove marks that you've pointed us to in your wonderful lecture that showed striations that are consistent with some kind of mechanical turning.
Right.
Clearly those vases were turned like we turn objects on a lathe.
Yes. And the work of some of the engineers I know, they did measurements to the rim, to the body, to the base, and it happened that all these vases are symmetrical. The left side, the right side, the height, the top, the polishment. So, as you said, it's impossible to be done without high technology.
So this is Chris Dunn's work and the work that Ben Van Kerkwijk has worked on.
Yes, exactly.
We've interviewed Ben for Reality Check. In fact, he was on a short while ago, and we're now following up on the ground here in Egypt. So we've interviewed Ben, and he's told us what he's seen, and we've come and seen it for ourselves. What is this thing? Is this a pre-human civilization?
It can be pre-human, or as I believe, it is an early human civilization with advanced technology, advanced knowledge.
If it is a this human generation civilization, how come there's no record of it? Why have we not found any records or notes or descriptions of that human civilization that you suggest might have existed before now?
No, we do. But we don't see it in a good way. We have hundreds of evidence, but unfortunately we relate these evidence and these products and these megalithic sites to newer civilization. Like when you go to Mexico, they say the Mayan. When you go to other places, they always pick up a modern date like 3000 BC or 2000 BC.
So what age do you think, for example, the pyramids are?
Okay, if we talk about the cycles of civilizations, okay, the ancient Egyptians left the information for us. They say each cycle is around 25 to 26,000 years. The pyramid was built either in the second cycle or the third. So if we go backwards by time, so between 75,000 BC and 100,000 BC.
Oh my God.
That if we talk about one group of cycles.
So you don't think the pyramids were built 5,500 years ago, which is, I think, the conventional Egyptology explanation?
No, it's impossible. When you check the constructions of Dynasty 4, for sure we know it was built by them. The technique is completely different, the tools, the precision, and no one had this technology. You are talking about a pyramid. You know, a pyramid is a project our modern machines and our modern brains will stop as an, if you allow me to say, as an idiot face, not able to understand how we can achieve this project.
So I'm fascinated in the image that you showed us yesterday in the temple of what looks like a helicopter and a submarine, and even, dare I say, some kind of lenticular disc-shaped object. What are they?
I always explain that truly these are two layers of writings, okay? But my question is always why? Why these two layers? Why they picked up certain samples to be put above each other, creating these shapes? It was not random. These shapes are not coincidence of a mistake or of a kind of art.
I mean, the helicopter particularly, it's a helicopter. It's not some other, it's not a pareidolia. We're not mistaking that image for something else. It's definitely a chopper.
I agree with you. And that's why I'm saying it was deliberately made in a very good level of knowledge.
But okay, forgive me if I'm a pedantic journalist. I want to pin you down on this. If it's a chopper, how the hell did whoever rendered that on a temple in ancient Egypt, how the hell did they know what a chopper looked like?
Don't forget, we talk about high consciousness. These people developed so many skills, including brain abilities. So their consciousness and their abilities to receive and maybe to see the future was different from us. And now, this is important. We think that the helicopter, when it was made that time, for them it was future. Maybe it was a technology from the past. But we think it is future for them.
So you think it might actually be a relic, an image from a previous civilization that also built helicopters and submarines? It's just as plausible, I suppose.
I see it very possible.
Can I ask you this, Mohammed, and I don't want you to get you into trouble with your colleagues in Egypt, but do you think that this possible alternative history is being suppressed?
Yes, in a very strong way.
Why?
I think the people who put the rules of Egyptology didn't, in the beginning, they didn't believe that there is a kind of high technology can do this kind of work. They were expecting the laborers doing lots of hand work, manual work, long time, primitive technique. But it happened that we found that this is not correct, okay? But unfortunately, these books, old books, and these history and PhDs and so many of these information became like a holy script. And the junior students now for Egyptology are afraid to question this information.
Has it been hard for you to be a bit of a maverick, taking the contrarian view?
Yes, it was very hard because you have to speak to hundreds. And if you convince one, there are hundreds more are not following the same kind of explanation.
Do you think it's possible that the civilization that was here before this human civilization was non-human?
Maybe my own feeling, no. I feel superior human civilization existed, okay? And by the way, I think they were more than one civilization. They were, in my opinion, hundreds of civilizations.
You see a lot of the imagery in the walls, the hieroglyphs, the paintings, these beautiful images, and I know a lot of them are allegorical. They're telling a story.
Yes.
And they show reptilian heads. There's a lot of reference to reptilians. There's gigantic humans. There's giants. And there are people with very large, almost swollen heads that I have to say are not dissimilar to what we call the grey aliens. You know, I mean, is it possible that what we're talking about is a non-human intelligence that was here before us?
I learned a lesson a long time ago not to say yes easily or no easily. So it is possible, okay? But I'm telling you what I believe, and according to some understanding, that many of these figures are representing powers. The mix of the human power with the power of alligators, falcons, and other creatures. As if the human studied these creatures in a very good way, and they reached the level how to develop their abilities, their consciousness, to get close to these creatures.
Do you think we'll ever know the real story of what that civilization was in ancient
I think
pre-dynastic Egypt?
we are getting close and we are on the right path, because I started this business 24 years ago, and I can tell you the first visitors I met at that time, they didn't pay attention to what we say now. But by time, over the years, the number of followers of so-called alternative history is increasing. And I started with like 5 people, later 500, now thousands.
It has been treated very much as a fringe subject, almost with a bit of mockery and irony, hasn't it?
That, yes, but that was like 10, 15 years ago. But now, because of social media, because of all the videos is showing the truth, so it became accepted. Yes, it's still hard a little bit, but believe me, so many people now, so many officials, so many academics, they have now big questions.
Well, I hope you're right, Mohammed. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.